Peace, peace. 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 Can you hear me
Yeah, I
there?
can hear you. Can you hear me?
How do I sound?
Good. Can you turn it up a little bit?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Do I sound choppy?
No, you don't sound choppy at all.
Okay, okay. So, City, we live. I'm about to put the link in the back chat for the fam. I think Amadi still got the show going over there.
Okay. No, I think he might have just ended it. I think.
Okay, throw it in the chat.
Turn the TV off.
Well, we can go ahead and get this thing going. This is the first inaugural Food for Thought Sundays with IAmSankofa TV. This is Sinead. This is my first show, and I'm lucky to have the Truthstorian with me tonight. We're gonna go over some. It was interesting because I heard your build on the Dagger Squad show. You know, shout out to the Dagger Squad. Shout out to Six Dynasty Media. You know, and you build about the early Black church. So I just wanted you to, I don't know if you had enough time to get everything you wanted to get out. So I want you to kind of go over that bill. I know me you talked about it before on the back check, but
Yeah, sure.
you kind of go over it. You know what I'm saying? Start, if you can start from the beginning. To where kind of the Black church kind of ventured off to be more a little bit about money, and how we can use these same institutions as it did back then to empower ourselves
Uh,
and find some liberation.
all right. So, I mean, we could go all the way back to as far as you want, but I'm just gonna start here, and I'll start by saying that, and I'm gonna primarily talk about or start from when the British have control. I'm not gonna talk so much about the Catholic areas, deal with the Protestants, because that's mostly what we are, and that's due to the experience we went through. But um, initially, when Africans are brought here, and let's say the early 1600s, there was not a push to become Christian. So, for about the first century or so, we do still practice some of our West African traditions, although not blatantly out in the open. We do still keep those things with us because the church at hand, the Anglican church in particular, It is not necessarily a part of their doctrine, the conversion of the enslaved. The Spanish and Portuguese under Catholicism took a different approach where they, part of their mission or how they went about things was to convert, in particular, the Native American to Catholicism. So over time, within the first century, century and a half, uh, Quakers began to enlighten some of the Africans or teach them about Christianity. And this is primarily in places in the north. And then more and more Africans began to get exposure to Christianity, right? You do have many who may have exposure to it via Catholicism because a good portion of the Africans are brought from places like Jamaica. And Jamaica at the time is Spanish run, although British began to take it over. But you have those places where Catholicism still is. Africans get exposure to Christianity there. And then those places where Africans are what they call seasoned before they're taken to the states or the 13 colonies at the time. So we begin more and more to have this exposure to Christianity. Now, the Quakers around 1688 begin as part of their what they have this thing called meetings, and this is their like church gatherings. They begin to try to persuade some of the people in their organization to not necessarily be involved in the slave trade, right? So when that takes place, you'll start to see that a certain number, and this is around the Revolutionary War coming into play, 1688 to like a century's period. You'll start to see a number of free Africans that start to come up. This is due to the Quaker manumitting or freeing his African. And this goes on for a while. So the Quakers are going back and forth. A little bit later in the 18th century, 1700s, the Wesley brothers are in Europe and they come from Europe to the States with their newer ish kind of brand of Christianity. And this is called Methodism. And this is during a period, this is the first one, the two periods that occur called the Great Awakening. And during these periods of what is called the Great Awakening, there are religious revivals that take place, and people really Christianity, and it starts to get heavily immersed into culture. A lot of conversion taking place, a lot of just heavy emphasis on religion. So the Quakers are doing their thing, and then you have this new religious fervor that's coming up where the Wesleys are encouraging the teaching of these enslaved Christianity. So now you have a concerted effort to have these people learn or be exposed to Christianity. The problem or the kind of apprehension for Europeans doing this was this, and the fact that they had made a deal in Europe after kicking the Moors out that they would not enslave another Christian. So this gave them their right or their way to go ahead and do what they did to non-Christians or what they call heathens in their pagan religions, which would be people like Africans, West Africans in particular, and the native indigenous people that they met in the Americas, right? So now you have this push within these British colonies to make this concerted effort to expose these Africans to Christianity. And so you start to see Africans begin being exposed and educated and taught about Christianity. During this time, we have began to, in these Spanish type of run colonies, take that Catholicism and syncretize it, or um, take parts of it and blend it in and immerse it with our West African cultures that we brought over here. So this is where you see in those Spanish colonies, in particular, things like Santeria and Candombe and Palo and all of these syncretized religions encompassing West African traditions and Catholicism. This is why you'll see imagery and these things of candles with Roman Catholic saints on them. They have dual meanings within those things because the word is syncretized. They took those things, but they have dual meanings. One of those meanings is what to their native religions were. But those are in Spanish colonies. In the English colonies, the Quakers are now teaching some of these Africans about Christianity. The Methodists that are coming up are starting to teach about this Christianity. You have an organization that starts in 1701 called Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, that is established by the Anglican or the English Church, Church of England. And so they do what? They propagate the gospel in the foreign parts. The foreign parts are the places where they have their colonies. And so they began to use this particular mechanism to propagate this, to convince these people. But in order for it to work, the key is they have to convince the slave owners and all the participation in the slave trade that just because these Africans become Christian, that you do not have to free them, right? Because, like we said, after the medieval period, they made rules or whatever amongst themselves that Christians would not enslave other Christians. And this is how slavery dies out of Europe, because prior to that, they were enslaving one each other. But due to the low numbers that they have now, due to Black Plague and to the war with the Moors for all those years, their numbers throughout Europe are depleted. So they make this type of agreement. So, okay, we're back in these colonies. Now you have the Quakers doing their thing. You have the Methodists doing their thing. You have the Anglican Church doing their thing. Then you have the
Real
rest.
quick, real
Yeah,
quick,
go ahead,
Danny.
bro. Go ahead.
Quick
Stop me
question.
anytime. Go ahead.
What makes you think it took so long for the practice of them illegally, kidnapping and enslaving our ancestors? What makes you think it took so long for people on this landmass to let it go?
To to let go of what?
To get rid of the practice and to outlaw the practice.
The practice. Clear it for me. Just say it to me another way. I'm not 100%
You
sure.
see how early the Europeans and Britain, they abolished slavery a little bit before the Americans did.
Yes.
So I was trying to see what made you think it took so
Because,
long
oh, I
for that to
got you.
happen.
The push to abolish it is coming from Britain. We're British colonies at the time. That's the quote unquote mother country. So as Quakers are doing things in Pennsylvania, those Quakers are also doing things in England. And so they're trying to push policy in England to end the slave trade within England. And so those same Quakers, because those are the people from England, all those places, Liverpool and Bristol, end up coming to the Americas. So those Quakers then try to adopt that. I believe it's around 1688. There's somebody in England doing it, English Quaker, and there's an English Quaker doing it here. Benjamin Franklin is a prime example of this because he comes from there to here, and he gets involved in the establishment of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, which is the first abolition society. You see, because that attitude have been brewing on both sides of the water, not with everybody, but with small groups of people, and they tended to be people involved with the Quakers early on, and then later people like the Methodists to a certain extent, and other Protestant groups, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with
Right.
you.
So that's real. So now you have Africans getting exposed to these things slowly but surely. What I mean by exposure is you're beginning to be taught the Bible. So what the key with that is one of the things that how schools were primarily set up for was to learn how to read. But guess what you're learning how to read? You're learning how to read the Bible. So by being exposed to this Christianity and the means of them trying to get you to read and understand it, some are privy to now becoming literate. And of course, they're reading other literature, getting exposed to other things outside of the Bible, right? So the Quakers began to free some of their Africans, right? We have more that get free because some Africans fought in the Revolutionary War. So now you have a small free community that is growing up, but they're not Americans, they're not accepted by America, what have you, so forth and so on. These Quakers began to help them. And part of it is the exposure to religion, and through their religious organizations, began to help the people. Thus, the establishment of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society and other groups like that, right?
Right, and since you said abolitionist societies, man, you had talked before about Moses Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make it clear. I'm not saying that I'm not in any way, shape promoting us going to the church as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
That using these organizations, these societies, and move how they did back then, but kind of tweak things to fit a more modern sense.
Yes. So this is
Moving
where,
as organization. That's
right.
point.
So this is what I hope that people begin to look at in that regard is to not necessarily look at the church as far as just them studying or how they worshiped, but the church provided other services for the community, which made it the center of the community. And in that came things like protection. They were stops on the Underground Railroad for runaway slave and fugitive slaves. They were gathering places for when Europeans would have mobs and try to burn down, kill, or beat up the black people. They would run to their churches. Excuse me. They, they were also the establishers of some of the earliest black schools that we have. They also found a mechanism to take care of the most vulnerable in the black community, which were the elderly or women and the children. So the church provided services through organizations that they created to address the issues of the people. So this is why it stood at the center. So if people want to look at the church and learn from the church, those are some of the things that you can understand how it still to this day plays a central part in our community. And it's not necessarily 100% attributed to what is on the pages of Job or Jeremiah. It's the services that they provide to the community through the organizations. So what I
Yes.
think, so what I then go on to say is, if you wanted to look at an example that provided or attempted to provide those same services to the people outside of a religious paradigm, then that's where you understand the importance of the Black Panthers. And for that short stint, how the Black Panthers stood at the center of the Black community because they provided a defense, obviously, we know, with their willingness to bear arms and defend themselves, but they also provided a whole slew of services for the community. They provided a breakfast program that people were aware of. They had a clothing store. They had a clinic. They had a bookstore. They had a job training school, right? These are all services that the Black Panthers provided outside of a religious context. And this is why people have such an affinity or love for the Black Panthers, and not necessarily just because they had some shotguns. They provided services for the people. So when we look now and we want to really get into these organizations that you speak of, this is how we might want to look at these things because we have a history through our experience in this part of the world of always organizing to achieve certain goals. But through something that they created called COINTELPRO, their main point not to, worry about you taking over the country via guns. No, their biggest fear was your ability to organize, because every time you organize, you were effective. Not every time, but on grand things when you had your most success, you organized for it. You organized to do something that you think is simple, but it was hard for the people, and to make a bus boycott, which led them having to actually address your concerns and issues. That only works when you have the ability to organize and say, all right, no one's riding a bus. But in order to achieve that, we got to make sure that we still find a mechanism for you to get back and forth to work and where you got to go. It's organization that takes those things, right? And the church sat at the center of that for a long time. But we tend to back away from it because as people become conscious or whatever path they take, they tend to get away from Christianity. And then you want to reject all of the church's influence in our life.
Yeah, and just to speak on that point, um, like the conversation we had before, like I came up in a AME Zion church.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the community I lived in, the church was at the center of it. And these people weren't spooky people, but
Mm-hmm.
I can just tell the organization. It seemed like every time there was a church function, something we was doing something, whether we was giving some food out, job placement,
Right.
cutting people grass for free, feeding the elderly.
Right.
No matter what house I was in, I could eat, I could sleep, and it would be no problem.
Right.
If I got caught somewhere doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, somebody from the neighborhood was going to get me. You know what I'm saying? And then
Right.
when I got to the crib, I would get it from my grandparents.
Right. That
You see
church.
what I'm saying? But
Mm-hmm.
there was a community there. And I'm saying that's what we need to get back to. Forget the pages, what it says on the pages. Let's get back to that kind of organization,
Right.
kind of community where we didn't need police walking through trying to police us who didn't understand our culture.
So if
You see what
something
I'm saying?
sits at the center, something sits at the center, whether it's a church or whatever, that binds us together. So we have to look, okay, what is the essence of all of that? The essence is we're willing to have a voluntary association with each other, which means that we're willing to voluntarily associate and look out for each other. And so this is how community forms, is because those people, in most cases, voluntarily choose to look out for each other, to support each other, and all the things it takes necessary to maintain a community. You're voluntarily doing those things. We have to be willing to put in the work and realize that I volunteered, that SNAB, that I'm going to look out for you and your children and do what I can within my means, and vice versa. This establishes a solid community because at the very end, I ain't got to be all in his business, but I'm there to help him, to support them in their path. And what do we say now? One of the things that we lack, yeah, we all live amongst each other, but we've lost the community. We haven't moved from the neighborhood. We're still there. Wherever whatever the neighborhoods around our country is, you're still there. But we lost community.
And I really think, and to harp on it again, I understand that we're not there right now. We've lost that. But what I'm saying is that type of organization, that type of community, that type of self-policing that we had at those times.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need to get back to.
Mm-hmm. So we have to have something that sits at the center that makes us all a community, or have at least begin to organize around those things. It could be for whatever, because we're all tall, because we're all black, because we all got 2 hours, whatever your cause is that's going to sit at the center of you forming this community. Hopefully, it's something like we're all African and have a shared experience in the Americans and blah, 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 blah. But whatever it is, it's something that has to be true and it has to be solid. And then you build from that. Say, okay, at the very foundation, you are my brother and sister, and let's go. So we don't ever have to question that. So why are y'all together? I'm together because that is my family, and family does whatever it takes to support each other. So as that group grows, we know that that is what makes us the common thread. We are there to support each other as family. So that leads to things like cooperative economics when that time comes, or looking out for each other, like you mentioned, or making sure the children that are not yours are still provided for and taken care of within the community, or making sure that somebody's that 90-year-old lady that you know live on the seventh floor, that she's not sitting up there eating cat food hungry. All those things gotta come into play. They can only come and play, and I could only care about the 90-year-old on the seventh floor eating cat food if I realize that that is I have a connection with that person. And I've chose that that African descended person is my family and my community, and I must be responsible for them, whether blood related or not. So I guess I'm saying is those values have to still sit at the center of the thing. They don't have to come in the form of a church or a mosque or a temple or shul or whatever it is, but the values still have to sit at the center of it. So whenever you feel that you're getting too far from the course or path or need some direction, you point back to the values, right?
Now, definitely when it comes with that, briefly before I forget, I wanted you to do like a quick, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, intro on Moses Dixon,
Oh man.
real, real, real fast.
All right, I'll give you a little one. So Moses Dixon comes prior to the Civil War. He deals with an organization called the Knights of Liberty. This Knights of Liberty organization was come up, and how he stated it was going to be the one that was going to lead the revolt of all revolts to take over and free the African, and they were a secret society. This came and didn't come into fruition because something happened that kind of put that idea on the back burner, and what happened was the Civil War, right? So the Civil War takes place, and he kind of how do we say it, the efforts to go ahead and um pursue this obvious revolt went to the background because we're in the midst of fighting, the Great War, right? So he has
Yep.
that organization. That is the Knights of Liberty. He's also involved prior to the war in the Underground Railroad. As far as AME, he was a preacher in the AME church as well. So after that, there's an order that comes about called the what is it? The Knights of Tabor, Tabor. And this Knights of Tabor is closely resembles what people may assume are Masonic organizations or secret society or something to that effect. So he has this nice table, and under that is the component of, with most of these organizations, of insurance and aid societies. Those are what your fees are for, and burial societies. So they lay out the essence of all those organizations. We're just losing them, so we don't really see it anymore. But that's why. And so that effort later leads to the establishment of a hospital, and that was one of the main hospitals that we had, and that was called was it Taborian Hospital, and that Taborian Hospital was in Missouri. So all the way from this Moses Dixon and his plans prior to the emancipation of the African in the Americas, he had an organization that he was gathering all these people in a secret societal format in order to start the revolt of all revolts. And then prior after the Civil War, he still continues his mission for the people, becomes a preacher in the AME church, realizes this connection that we're talking about, and builds this secret society to help and address the people. in that efforts through cooperative economics and cooperative mechanisms leads to the establishment of Taborian Hospital. So now we walked all the way from him doing that, excuse me, to us having a black hospital. And that's just briefly, the history of the Taborian Hospital and Moses Dixon. It's a real interesting story, man. Real crazy.
It is. It is. So that's kind of moving. Just to say again,
Hmm.
organization.
Hmm.
Okay, we can be somewhat effective apart, but when we come together, we can be powerful. We've seen different movements throughout history, whether it be, the most honorable, Elijah Muhammad or the most honorable Marcus Garvey. They had organization. More importantly, with Marcus Garvey, he was able to get different people from different ideologies to come in one room.
Hmm.
Whether, some of the things he did bad, against some things he did good, still that gave us a great model to go after. So what points do you see within the UNIA or a different organization where we can kind of tweak, what I'm saying, their structure and implement those type of, communities now
Well, I
to make
think
some
one
changes?
one of the things is he tried to really keep in touch or grasp of the culture and the way that he named things. But I'm scared, I'm kind of hesitant to say that because we tend to OD on things and then we give ourselves these grand titles and we just get wrapped up in the show, the style as opposed to the substance. But one of the things he did was he began to name Sons of Africa and Ethiopian Cross and all these other things that he began to name these organizations under the UNIA banner. So when we start to name our organizations again, we might be able to look at that and be mindful of that might be a something to keep in mind. Names have importance. Names have value. Names have meaning. You just can't arbitrarily name something. It has to have substance to it. That's one thing. And then also the establishing of small businesses because that laid at the core of that. It wasn't just the UNIA and the great parades and the great speeches. It was the fact that they were setting up businesses. The only problem was that they were all owned by the UNIA. So when the UNIA mother or parent organization falls, all the businesses fall with it. And that's what happened in the end. If we're going to do that, yeah, we can be a part of a greater organization. But if I'm going to show Seneb, you're going to have this mechanic shop. Okay, so maybe one of the things that since the organization helps Seneb get that business and it's a part of the greater organization, that the organization has a percentage of that income, but it's Seneb's business. It's that we have a contract though that part of the income from that business that the organization helps you to establish goes back to the parent organization, right? So some reason the parent organization falls, Snap still has his business, right? So what happens with the UNIA when Garvey starts to get all in trouble? What does Hoover and all these guys do? They began to look in the taxes and they want to take the assets of the organization. So as he falls, the organization doesn't fall completely because his wife and others try to still run it for a while. But that influence, as far as a base for creating cooperative economics, falls. Right? The Black Panthers had their thing, and it was kind of mixed up one and the same. So as COINTELPRO and the Feds start to hit the Panthers, the organizations lose. Their problem is they had brain drain. That's what happened to the Panthers. They began to take all of the minds away and left the muscle there to a certain extent. So the muscle without the mind leads to the creation of misguided people. And what comes out of the fall of the Panthers but our street organizations, Bloods, Crips in Chicago and otherwise? Because the minds Fred Hampton was taken from Chicago, but the muscle was still there. But the muscle now had no direction to continue the building for the community and kind of took the dark road.
no guidance. So a bunch of young kids, you know what I'm saying, no guidance. And now you got turmoil in the hood now because there's no one to kind of lead these young men.
You have something called, there's a film that came out called Bastards of the Party. And it tells you this, and it tells you how the Bloods and Crips really come up. And the reason it's named Bastards of the Party, because these are the bastard children that are left behind when the Black Panther Party crumbles. The mind and the parents to go in no direction. So the babies of the 70s who still have this anger in the system, they got a foot on the neck, channel it in the way they do know best. Get it however you can get it. And they're trying to defend themselves because they're stuck in these areas now where it's white flight taking place, and we're still, the remnants are coming up from all these places, and they're kicking our butt. The Italians and the Irish is beating the kids up all through Compton, all through Chicago, all through, different parts of New York where we're going. So now we got youth anger, but the minds are gone. The minds, meaning the guiding forces, the ones that can give insight on how to channel this anger into something productive, so you can clearly articulate what your anger is. And what I mean by that is the Black Panthers had a 10-point program. So when somebody ever came and said, well, what do you Negroes want? You had something where you could articulate what you want. Go ask somebody who's angry right now, what do you want? You get to talk, oh, I want to kill all the crackers, and blah, 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 blah. It's just.
But you see now how the early shaping of what we now have in our communities. You know what I'm saying? In some places, especially with the infiltration of narcotics.
Right.
And now you got the incarceration of these black men that were in the house that wasn't in the street. Some of them, majority of them were. We know that because you're in a system where you can't get a job. What else am I supposed to do?
Right.
You give me these drugs. I sell them. You lock me up.
Right, because we also weren't equipped. We were seeing that we couldn't take over or provide for our community. So if there was absence in the community, we couldn't fill that void. But we didn't see, okay, that was the way to eat. Well, goddamn it, there ain't no supermarkets around here. I'm gonna go get some vegetables and have the fruit stand again and build up for my fruit stand and get my fruit store or convenience store or whatever it is and do all of those things. And then on top, when you don't have the planning to see those things, when somebody drop a package by your door, you're gonna get it how you get it. And that's what you say. They took advantage of that.
So would you say?
Wait, hold on. Here's the key. Because now what we're talking about, you clearly understand what the purpose of COINTELPRO was. They was not afraid of your guns. They had to create this environment so that you would never have the ability to organize. Because your organizations and what you would lead you to do things like create an infrastructure for yourself. That was the point. Counterintelligence. We cannot have this coming out where these Negroes are working together. No. That's not going to work. Because when they do, they end up doing things like, okay, putting their money together and starting a little business and doing this and doing that. And then what? Shutting out the greater community who needs you to be a consumer in the market. Because your role in capitalism is to consume, not to own and capitalize off of it. You're the consumer. This is why us, don't have a bank account. And they don't push that. They need you to spend every piece of your check because you are the economic engine that keeps capitalism going. So you should never be an owner, and they would never put that in your mind.
So we have a situation where we have organizations, Black Panthers, UNIA, Nation of Islam. We have organizations where they're setting up businesses. They're having food drives. They're walking children to school. They're policing their own neighborhoods. And a effort by the government was to infiltrate, confuse, to cause confusion, and counter intel and stop. We weren't trying to I mean, take over the world, like Pinky and the Brain. We're just trying to empower ourselves and build our own functioning community.
Right.
And that, and they try their best to keep that from happening.
Correct. Yes.
So, so is it safe to say that early on, these, even Crips, Bloods, is it safe to say that these early on these organizations were doing good for the people as well?
It is very safe to say, and you would be correct because the record says that. Because the record says that those things came about when the Panthers got really messed up. Look at the places it comes from, Chicago and in California. When that organization was done and them babies, Fred Hampton Jr. is running around here and his father did all these great things is a perfect example. They took his father away from him. So what did that leave the baby do? The baby had, yeah, he had a support system there, but those hundreds of thousands of babies who were just like him now have lost that guidance in that direction to have to figure out many things on their own in the midst of fire. So those things come about because these people are going to school in Compton, walking down the block, and the Italians don't want them there. It's beating their ass. So they form a little group. We gotta protect each other. So now you're gonna get tired of doing that. You're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna either be the sheep or the wolf. And you start to become the wolf. And then they have urban flight, which then leaves the hood, and the hood turns into urban blight. Excuse me. So now you got a middle class neighborhood like Compton, now becoming a lower class neighborhood, and now you got a bunch of misdirected wolves who are gonna feed no matter what, because that's what a wolf do. So that prey ain't necessarily the European anymore because the European has what? Has gone. He went to the suburbs. So we prey on the people in our community because we're kind of misguided. That's what we're seeing. That's what the beginning was, and we're seeing remnants of it now. They didn't just start that shit to go and, kill everybody and mess up the neighborhood. They took away the guidance on purpose. That was the plan. Take away the minds. Huey P. Newton had a PhD degree. PhD. The Black Panther Party had a book list. The Black Panther Party had a newspaper. The Black Panther Party had arms of their enterprise that dealt with things like propaganda and all these other things. The Black Panther Party had business students there, so they were effectively trying to manage how are we gonna get this food to effectively reach the people through our breakfast program. This is the things that they don't want to tell us. They,
So real quick, um, as far as to put things in the same time frame, like the soul cities, the Wilmington, Durham, North Carolinas, the Philadelphias, the Black Wall Streets.
right.
Are these situations in the same era as the Black Panther Party? Like what separate movement was going on at the same time the Black Panther movement was going on?
What movement is going on? You still have well, not still have, you have the myth of the quote unquote civil rights movement. They're fighting for the same cause. It's just a different mechanism. The Muslims are fighting it through their religious branch, but they're still fighting for the same cause. And that cause was not necessarily equality, but equality in things that were basics. This is the key. I think many people thinking it was this great fight for integration on so many aspects, and it was not. And it was for equality or better standards for specific things. They were arguing, articulating their wants, and their wants was for better jobs, better housing, and better health care. Those are the main things. The March on Washington was a march on Washington for jobs. Before Martin Luther King was killed, he was doing organization for sanitation workers, and he was doing protests for better housing conditions in Chicago. One of the things that Malcolm X would go about and speak about was housing conditions in Chicago and in New York and in Philadelphia. So we were very clear about what we were, what we wanted and how, the things, the change that we wanted, you know?
So we have, like a Soul City. You familiar with Soul City? Independent,
Hmm.
black neighborhood that have their own banks, their own hospitals, their
Yes.
own schools. It seems like, with the unfortunate events, we have these sisters that are going missing. Amadi had a great show earlier speaking about Samaj, the
Hmm.
16-month-old who, you know, I mean, it's kind of hard to even, what I'm saying, deal with, so if we have those style communities now, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have situations like this going on. It seems like a lot of our great leaders, like Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, most of them Elijah Muhammad, they kind of preach separating. Malcolm X preached separating.
Okay.
You see, man, how being around these Europeans is kind of affecting us and our own communities. Look at the situation that we are in now.
Right.
So, talk about a little bit the Soul City situation and how they model their communities.
Hmm. So look, here we go. Here's this thing about separation. So if we want to be separated, we can look at it in one way as they did it for us. Because we kind of came up from the South and moved to New York, Philadelphia, Compton, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, all these places we went to, right? And they left. And we had the city. We didn't have the politics and all that. What I'm talking about, we had these quote unquote black neighborhoods. But we never took control of the businesses completely. Now, your examples that you're talking about, you do have um, there's a few locations where we did take control or we built our own businesses, right? And this, we're not talking about just in Black Wall Street. There were other places like the places you mentioned, Delaware, parts of Philadelphia, wherever they're all around. So we need to, I think there's a place that I saw in Texas that has a pretty good example of this, but we need to look at the places that currently have this, oh, right where you are. We need to really do studies on Atlanta because that economy and what it is was due to a major part of black businesses making Atlanta what Atlanta is at this point. This is the story that I think kind of gets suppressed and all of that. These were many of those AUC students staying and making Atlanta the big hub for them when they finish with the education and so forth and so on, and starting small businesses and starting these different type of businesses and creating the music culture and creating the art scene down there and having the advantage of having a black mayor to do these things and supporting small businesses, right? To a point now where Atlanta is literally the chocolate city. There's not too many left. So we need to look at places like that. There was places outside of DC in the suburbs of Maryland that do have a pretty affluent black community. And what are they doing in regards to, did they take over the school system there? Are they creating businesses there? Do they own the gas station down the street? Um, and then I'm saying that to say we can't all move to those places, but if those places, say for instance, like this, you know, place in Delaware or Maryland that might have a black grocery store, or can they then have a branch in Newark? So all those people, they can't go live to the suburbs where they are, but they then have access to a black grocery store. You know what I mean? These things that we can still provide, or services or businesses that we can provide to our communities, no matter where we are, until we can get a pretty um, effective uh, population of people in one area to take it over. Because that's going to involve taking over city councils and local boards and all that other fun stuff to dictate policy, right?
Right, right. And that's and I kind of like the flow how we're going with it because um I kind of talked about this before. One of my friends is we're kind of too focused on the national scene. Like I'm not really concerned about Donald Trump. I'm concerned about especially here in Atlanta is who's going to replace Kasim Reed as mayor. And he's kind of going out of office at they're trying to attach some scandal to his name. I can't speak of what he did or he didn't, but it's definitely it's big. I mean, there's even a story out right now talking about, it's possibility that Atlanta may, elect his first white mayor in a long time. You got to
Mm-hmm.
think about that. A very sort of East Coast Hollywood scene. I mean, you got Tyler Perry Studios. I mean, he bought Fort McPherson. You
Right.
got people from up north moving down here. The traffic is crazy. Anybody who has been in Atlanta.
Because black folks have gone that whole, like I'm saying, they have established a beautiful population where you have a very affluent black middle class that's there, and even to another extent, a black upper class that is done there. And now white folks have seen this as far as the culture that is there, and as far as its location and history and so forth and so on. And so many of those black folks see a come up. And so they are the reasons that gentrification is happening there too, because they're selling it. Like, okay, yeah, we've been here since 80s, 90s, or whatever, and these people want to come and pay me $1.5 million for my house out right outside of Buckhead or in Lithonia that I paid $250,000 for. You think, of course, they're going. So this is happening. Gentrification happens in places like Atlanta as well. Just as, just because it's the capital society and these people don't see it, like, okay, I need to really stay here to keep this a strong black community. They like, look, what is it? When I was down there, I think Dunwoody was really starting to really pop a little bit. So places like that where, black folks may have been middle class and all that stuff. What do? They're selling their places like, yeah, I'm getting my money, I'm getting up out of here.
I mean, you see a lot of I'll be honest. I live in North Atlanta in the Alpharetta area. And where I'm at now, you don't see a whole lot of, what I'm saying, black people, but a lot of black people are moving in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because, it's kind of a catch 22 because, my first, most important thing is schools.
Mm-hmm.
So the schools up here up north are very, very good. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm pushing that with my children as much as I can.
Right.
The schools, I mean, not to say they're not good schools on the south side or east side or west side, but it's alluring to come up to the north side.
Right. See, that's one of the things though. So we have these communities now, we're gonna want better schools. In order to get the money to create better schools, we need to take over community boards and in many cases school boards. So that's going to take our involvement and getting local leadership set up so that we can go and push them to get fundings to establish the school. Because if you have a strong black school now that has the funding that it needs, you're going to create competition and attract people to that neighborhood to take advantage of things like that school. So all of those things begin, they're moving parts that could work together in establishing this community that we're talking about. And and in a mechanism where it's going to be duplicatable. But if we don't create industry, we're going to have a hard time really creating an effective middle class like we need to push some of these things. The idea of having just a lower class or a low wage labor force in the black quote unquote community to come up is not realistic because we don't live in the times where you could have that job and still maintain a way to effectively maintain your life. At one point, you could come out of school with a high school diploma and go right into a factory and make, whatever, and you stay in that factory until you retire. And so you have history of your father, your grandfather, your uncles working in the Goodyear plant, or on the widget assembly line, or doing that for 35 years. That's unheard of nowadays with people staying one job for 30, 40 years.
Yeah, it's hard. You gotta generate enough, you know, funds. That's why I say at this point there is no middle class, especially for the African American, for our community. You making good money, or you in a situation where you really gotta, almost have a full time and a part time, or you and your queen, both of y'all gotta work, to be able to support and to make ends meet. And
So
I don't know.
unless we
Go ahead.
create black businesses, we're not going to be able to, unless we're trying to find our own solutions for us. Unless we begin to create more black businesses, we're not going to find a effective solution to address the masses of black people. Because everyone in the hood, no matter where you are, is not going to be able to go up and start no business. But everyone has the ability to go and work for somebody's business.
In my opinion, that we can begin to organize and get these things done, we can create better communities to where a young girl like Samaj, that won't happen to her.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Creating a situation where you don't have thousands upon thousands of black girls, black teens missing, and no
Right,
one's
but
addressing it.
Here's goes. So we're gonna have to, if that's the case, then we're gonna have to really be honest with ourselves, and we're gonna have to really do some self introspection, like nobody else would have to do. And so, what does that mean? When our theme music consists of having girls kissing girls and doing the wild shit that we do in songs, and then you drive down any one of the peach trees and you see 75 strip clubs back to back to back to back, knowing they're haven for many cases, women or young girls who are not in the best situation, which are those breeding grounds for those type of things that can happen to them. We got to be realistic and say, like, look, well, then we're going to have to address these things as well, because we can't have it both ways. I don't see it, and I don't think the answer is to make some Puritan society, but we got to be realistic. We have those things and this exploitation of the women as a central point, and to a certain degree, we've become numb to it. And you got the women embracing these things where they do like people do. You take a negative situation and now it's empowering. So now a stripper is empowering, and so now that the community and the support for the woman is not what it used to be.
So do you think, to kind of, let's talk about, Jay album, the 444 album, where he talks about that, going to the strip clubs, trying to save and build communities, like he refers to the Jewish community or so-called Jewish community of doing, kind of moving to that side. I think that's a way right now. I think like the younger kids, like, the 21 Savage, that niche of hip hop. But I think like the older generation, the 86 and up babies, you know what I'm saying, they can understand what he's talking about. At some certain point, like you said, we can't have it both ways. We gonna have to fix ourselves, police ourselves, you know what I'm saying, so we can build these organizations to
Right.
force these things to change within our community.
As a quote unquote older head now, I'm not going to sit up here and kid you. Like, my generation was not no holy now generation, and my generation probably created this. I come from the Too Short, Ice T, and a bitch is a bitch generation. So, you know, this ain't coming from no holier than now place. But what I'm saying is, it's become to the point where it's become obsessive, and it's to a point now where it's being accepted as the norm in our community, and it's okay, and it's cultural for us. We don't go to clubs anymore to party, we go to strip clubs to party. And every song or our theme music is based on our hypersexualized life that we lead.
And think about that too. This I just thought about it, how some of our music, like you explained, it's a very grungy, what I'm saying, misogynistic culture. It's very demeaning rhetoric to the black woman. We really don't have that many TV shows. You know how we had music channels on BET, TRL, and all those other shows where people can display their videos. So you don't really see it that much now on TV. but definitely on the YouTubes, on the World Star Hip Hop, you get to see these videos.
Or,
So,
like I say, go down to any peach tree
oh, I
and
feel you.
count the
I
number
understand.
of strip clubs.
I feel you. So think about this. Has this music, do you feel like this music that talks, ill of our women kind of desensitized us
Mm-hmm.
to how we treat and how we handle, our black woman? You feel what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
There's a video Marty had up on his channel. I recommend people go check it out where this woman was being assaulted. So this individual who was witnessing it, instead of going to aid this woman, he put out his phone and recorded it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, come on, man.
Or somebody starts a camera up and I take a garbage bags full of money and I go down while somebody plays theme music while I take my money out and proceed to throw it in a woman's face who is happily allowing me to take money and smack a phone
She's okay with it. Mm.
stop amount of money into her face. While my theme music is playing, telling me and encouraging me, it's all okay by everybody. But somehow she has in her mind she's empowered by this move, and I feel empowered because I went to do this act to her, and I got my theme music and my boys, and we all having a good time.
Mm. We got to do better.
Right? This is where we
Yeah,
are. It's just the
I
reality.
agree.
I'm not. Listen, I got my own judgments on it. I'm not trying to put any judgment on it either way, but I'm just saying this is the reality that we can't run from what's really happening. That's what's happening.
We definitely have to deal with it. We definitely have to start with self. Um, like the small things I've done recently. Like I don't even play. I really don't listen to too much anyway. Like I may be playing like the J444 album, but really I'm listening to Rhapsody right now. Like she got a dope record, but I try to keep the content that they listen to away from the current hip hop you see today. See what I'm saying? With the I'm gonna kill you, take your girl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying I'm gonna take your woman. Look at me. I
Girls
got a lot
kissing
of money.
girls.
Girls kissing girls, popping mollies and Percocets. Like this is a chorus to a record. And
But let me
that
preface
drum,
this.
that
Let me.
drum though you did a show about the importance of the drum.
Yeah.
And these songs are not good. It's the beats. It's that drum that really got us connected to it.
Right. But let me preface this for anybody who may be listening or watch this. I like my music ratchet. like I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not saying this for the babies at all. But it doesn't lead me to want to go and necessarily treat women in a certain fashion or want to go bust my guns in the mall or whatever. Nothing like that. But you're correct. We need more well-rounded music. The kids need access to just party music again. They need access to uplifting music again. They need access to all of it. Right? I'm not saying put them in a bubble where they're listening to Shirley Caesar all day, but goddamn, they don't need to be listening to mumble rap all day.
I mean, something to where they can get some knowledge out of it. NBK, the radio morning show where he be giving, he be some music that's kicking some knowledge.
Well,
So
the
rock,
point, the thing
some rock
is,
can go. So I know these new kids ain't really gonna like that, but at some point we're gonna have to change at day level from the 12-year-old to the 18-year-old level.
mhm,
We have to, and that's where, like I said, to go back to organization, we have to all or try to join some type of structure to where we can go back to building these communities to where these kids don't even want to deal with that kind of music. There's more hope to I'm gonna go to school, be the flyers and sell drugs and bust my gun. We want to make sure that we giving these, like a new era Detroit do, a new era Atlanta do. You know what I'm saying?
it's most effective when we can try to actually show them the way. So we need to struggle with the fact that we can tell these kids not to do those things, but we don't have many answers for an alternative for them at this point. And so it's going to take some to have some real sit downs and come to quote unquote Jesus moments in order to figure out what do you then tell them. I can't just go and tell them to stop selling drugs and have no alternative for them. I can't just go and tell them that all you need to go is go to school. In reality, yes, that's going to help you tremendously, but it's a strong possibility you may not have a job with the diploma or not. So we gotta, the elders, the older people, whatever, have to really sit down and struggle and find a way. Well, how do we? we're not gonna tell these babies no pipe dream that everything's gonna be okay. Because the reality is, it's grown folks with college degrees can't get no jobs out here.
That's a fact. That's a fact. I mean, and it's a revolving system. You know, we still got brothers and sisters that's incarcerated that got to come out into the same economic situation to where, you know, not being able to find, like I say, even if you get a chance to find a job, are you going to be able to make a wage to where you can support yourself, that you don't have to go back into any, you know what I'm saying, activity that can put you back where you was.
Right.
You know, so we got to have something where, you know, and I even charge myself to even try to figure out something to where, you know, you can come out and establish someone with some, you know, job placement. Like we can put the energy we put into the debates into uplifting communities. Like, I mean, there's definitely a lot of people are, most definitely.
How about us just exploring future jobs, so we're not always last to the game, and us trying to set up a situation where we have a little bit of foresight into seeing what's coming down the pipe, and try to get if not on pace for a little bit ahead of it, so we always don't end up at the trail end where we only become the consumer because we're late to the game. These are the things we need to question, because we find a good way to manipulate it and do all this fun stuff with it. But as a consumer, as a consumer, you know. But yeah, bro, I need to run over here and take care of some stuff, man.
Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you having me. I can come back another time for sure.
We try to set up, you know, definitely Sundays is going to be the day where I come and do another food for thought show. So I might have some other topics written in my notepad that I want to, you know, pick your brain about. Yeah. Definitely want to get the family all to come on, and we all just do a big bill. So, like I said, I appreciate you. Appreciate everyone who viewed, like, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Peace.